Good day, everybody. My name is Marco Zanzotra. I'm an industrial engineer, although I've been working in different capacities in management consulting as well as in change management projects. I'm currently leading the operations of an e-commerce company in Germany, and I decided to start this project. It's called Complex Business Made Simple, in the attempt of simplifying some of these activities, complex business activities that are maybe complicated but not complex, and trying to sort of dive in and see what's in each and every one of them, so that people can benefit from knowing this. Today we're talking about CRM rollout. It's CRM rollouts are usually big, expensive projects that companies embark in the hope that it will bring some benefits in terms of usually first sales improvements or increase in sales and revenue, but also in process efficiency. So let's see what goes into each and every one of them. Before we start, a little disclaimer: I'm not doing financial advice or anything by any means, but these processes are maybe not complex, but they do actually carry some complexity. And the complexity usually is linked to the fact that you're dealing with business changes, and business changing means that usually you're dealing with people. And people are the most important asset that every business has. And therefore you need to be very careful in how you're doing with this. If you are not sure at any point, and if you maybe are lost, you don't know how to proceed, please reach for advice. There are people that do this for a living, and there's a reason for that. They can be quite demanding projects, but also they carry some complexity. So don't be afraid of asking for help. So who's this presentation for? Today we're going to look at something that can be useful for people that are rolling out or changing their company's CRM. Maybe you already have a CRM, you want to upgrade to a different version or to a completely different solution. And maybe you're still deciding whether you want to do this on your own within the company, or maybe you want to engage with an external consultancy. Maybe you're just simply part of a company who's changing a CRM and you're curious about what this entails. Sometimes you want to simply understand what changes can a CRM bring, because it's definitely more than just the software itself. Talking of the software itself, what is a CRM? Before we begin, it's important that we're on the same page. If you're asking sales professionals and marketing professionals, they will give you two completely different answers, I'm pretty sure. But essentially, what I mean by CRM is the software or the solution that manages customer-related information. That means if you are engaging with customers in any way, it could be phone, it could be in person, it could be chats, emails, it could be visits, whatever, you log these interactions or some of these interactions into a CRM, but also the information that goes with it. So if you're delivering quotes, if you are exchanging information, say project plans, drawings, or whatever kind of information, and if you're collaborating with other people in this solution, that is what a CRM is. So it's not something that purely manages, say, marketing activities, or purely manage the creation of quotes. Some people do create quotes in the CRM. Some companies prefer ERPs. Some companies do Excel quotes. It's very different from company to company. So the CRM to me is what manages the whole customer experience with a company. Said that, who uses a CRM? This is also an important point, because the people that are using the CRM within your company sort of define the approach that you have. I think the most common use cases are from marketing and sales, but of course, depending on the kind of organization. For instance, I mentioned I work in e-commerce. There's a lot that happens after sales. If something goes badly, or if there's an issue, or even if there's just a simple clarification with the customer, we need to engage with them, then the CRM becomes, covers the supply chain and the after-sales service as well. One last point, you may be familiar with the fact that different solutions use different terminology. What Salesforce calls opportunities, in another solution can be called deals. I think Pipedrive calls these deals. So, it's the same thing at the end of the day. So there's many solutions are just very comparable for the main features. So I will just not focus too much on these things, because they won't really affect the rollout process itself. Exactly. What can you expect out of today's presentation? So we'll cover a bit of process mapping. Process mapping is critical because it makes you understand how things are done in your organization from a process perspective. So who carries out which activities, with which tools, which documents are produced or consumed, on which systems. There's a lot that goes into process mapping. It's a big chunk of an implementation project. Second part, stakeholders. I mentioned at the very beginning, projects are made of people, companies are made of people. How do you involve, and successfully engage with these stakeholders? This is fundamental and critical for the success of your project. Just as critical, if not more, is communication. It's very much linked on how you engage with people, and it's very powerful. Communication, I've seen communication making or breaking projects. It's probably what will take most of your time in a change management project, and which is not very intuitive, but I promise you it's like that. Then we'll look at training and rollouts, very operational activities. What is it that we need to consider when we book training, when we plan training? What happens during rollout, on the day of rollout? How do we simplify these activities? And last but not least, measurement. Measurement is something that many companies or many people forget to do, or maybe they just sort of overlook, or it's just an afterthought. But really, measurement is really critical in projects like this. It seems everything is really critical, but it's really critical in projects like this because they're very expensive for a start. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars or euros on one side, but also they require a lot of effort and internal time that you need to dedicate to this. So you want to make sure that actually they produce the results that you expect. All right, let's dive in. So process mapping. There are essentially two approaches that you can look at. One, it's done through an external consultancy or through an agency, however you want to call it. And the other one, you can do this internally, obviously. The idea is that if you go for an external consultancy, you usually get hooked up with people that are experts on the topics. If you're approaching some of the big CRM companies like Dynamics or Salesforce or Oracle, these companies will definitely have partners that are expert not just on the CRM but also in your industry. They've been rolling out CRMs and solutions with other customers that operate in your industry. And industry is not necessarily, say, manufacturing or food and bev, but it could be just as wide as e-commerce or services industry. So these people usually know which kind of solution you're after, and they speak your language. So you guys are speaking the same language. It's easy to relate with them. Not only that, but they just make sure that they cover all the bases. Some people that maybe work in say services in e-commerce may completely forget that in manufacturing there's a lot more that needs to be taken care of because there are actually tangible goods that need to be moved and accounted for. So the important thing is that what an external consultancy does is adapting business mapping, so the business requirements into IT requirements. So it will just understand what you need as a business and then translate this so that whoever implements your Salesforce or Dynamics or the like will know exactly what you're after. Of course, an approach like this can be expensive, so it's not for everybody, and you obviously need to find the right partner. Again, the Salesforce, and I keep mentioning Salesforce, but really it could be anybody. Any CRM company will definitely put you in touch with people that they trust and that they will definitely deliver, but make sure you find the right partner that you can work with. Of course, you can also go internal and just do things within your organization. This is usually cheaper because, of course, you're just using one of the resources that you have within the organization. And there are pros in this. Look, you can, the person within the organization can definitely learn a lot more, can enrich their know-how. And it's something, there are definitely a lot of pros, not just professionally, but also personal pros. If the person will know who to go to for certain questions, but it comes with a price. Of course, that person will need to be most likely taken out of their current job because this is a very, very demanding project and you need to allocate the right time for it. People usually come with internal biases or, they're a receiver of internal biases of other people. So it's something that needs to be taken care of. It's not something that will break your project, but of course you need to be aware of this. And of course, I mean, as opposed to going from a consultancy, if you're going internally, then you most likely will find that the person has a narrower expertise on either maybe not the business, but maybe on the IT side of things. So again, all of this to consider. There's no right and wrong approach. Different companies at different stages of their lives may, prefer one or the other. For ease of understanding and simplification of the presentation, I'm just going to assume that you will go with an external consultancy firm, and I'm going to show you what they will do and what you're expected to do. So from an external consultancy, what they will do when you appoint them, they will essentially come to your office and understanding how you're conducting business. What is it that you're doing to generate leads, to engage with them, to maybe deliver quotations or offers to your potential customers. And then what happens after that? They will map each and every process in what they call the Aziz document. So this is as we're doing today. After that, they will obviously try and understand what are the requirements. So today you're doing this, they know already what the CRM does, but they try to understand how can this simplify your life, how can this simplify your business processes. So they will just do a to-be process. This is the jargon. All these processes usually come in form of flowcharts. There's a lot that goes into this in terms of details, and essentially they will just produce two documents, the Aziz and the to-be, and they will just compare and try to understand what are the differences. And they will compile what is called a gap analysis. So what are the difference between what we're doing now and what we will be doing in the future? Gap analysis usually is what drives the requirements. So what needs to be implemented to close this gap. What you need to do internally, of course, you need to allocate time, because the consultancy firm will not just have people going around and observing, but they will engage with people, they will interview them. This is the most common way of mapping processes. So you need to allocate time and make sure that you also manage the expectation on what to expect out of an interview. People feel uneasy in sitting in a room with somebody else that start questioning the work and everything, even though that's not don't do this maliciously. You need to manage that. Most importantly, once the to-be process is in place, or say it's formalized, you need to drive the adoption. So the consultancy firm can go as far as telling you this is how you should operate, this is how the system will change the way you work, but it's up to you implementing this and driving the change. Just as important, requirements. Requirements are not just gathered by the difference between the Aziz and to-be, but also there are unspoken requirements that are needed, maybe from different level of the organization. So it's very important that you understand requirements. I have some section on this later. And also, of course, driving the to-be process means that you are implementing the results of the gap analysis. So make sure you understand this very clearly. In the interview process that the consultancy firm will do, they will definitely involve at least one person for each process of area of expertise. The idea of doing this is they don't want to work by assumptions, even though they may know the industry. Every business has different shades of operating in the way they operate, and so they need to understand how your business works. My suggestion, and this is something that most likely will happen anyway, make it more than one person for critical processes. So generating leads, liaising with customer quotes or orders. If this is critical to your business, because this is what drives revenue, this is what drives your relationship with customers, then make sure you include more people. I worked in companies where there were only, say, 2 salespeople, and I promise you, these 2 people were working differently, even though they were sitting next to each other. So make sure you include everyone that needs to be included. One point around this is which kind of hierarchical position these people need to have in the organization. Actually, I would suggest that you include every level of the organigram. Everyone can contribute to give some level of details around the process. My priority usually is with whoever puts data in the system. The reason for that is that usually you want the system to have clean data, and you want to simplify the job of whoever is putting data in the system. One of the reasons to roll out CRMs is to achieve process efficiency, so to make more in less time. So ideally, usually the people that are spending more time are people that do data entry, or that they're busy talking with the customer. You want them to talk with your customer and focus on your customer, not on putting data in the system. So simplify their lives, understand what they're doing today and how you can make their job easier, their life easier. Of course, you are also important. It's also important that you include people that are consuming this data, and this will definitely refine the requirements. So in terms of reports, which data do you need? And then sometimes you have to find compromises between the two. But it's important that you understand, each person's and each party's point of view. So finally, include at least one line manager. This is important because first, again, this is most likely the person that will consume the data, but also the person that drives adoption, as well as some C-level execs. The reason for this is that these people are the ones that most likely will pay the bill to the consultancy firm, to the CRM provider and everything. And they also provide the alignment between the processes and maybe not the processes, but the company's strategy, as well as where the CRM would need to go. So these C-level execs can be critical in making projects, their commitment, their sponsorship, their engagement drives engagement down the lines as well. So make sure you include them as well. It's extremely important. One point, this is my suggestions that I learned over the years in a few projects. It's important that when you're liaising with the consultancy firm, you have clearly in mind what are your requirements and their priorities. The reason for this is I've seen companies that lists every requirement as a must-have. This is a priority A, and we must have this. But if everything's a priority, and then nothing is a priority. And jokes aside, it could be that many requirements will drive a long implementation time, but also will drive costs up. So make sure that your requirements are clear and they're agreed within your stakeholders and within your organization, so that when you pass them on to the consultancy firm, they know exactly how to prioritize them. Talking of stakeholders, it's important that you liaise with them and they understand what goes in each of the work packages. Say you have a sales force that is mainly on the road, and that you are, some of the requirements are, we would like to have a mobile app to liaise with to sort of put data into the CRM. This can be a requirement, is actually easily fulfilled with many of the CRM solutions today. But if this is not coming in the first package, or if it's coming later on, or if some of the functionalities are different from what people request, make sure that these people know. It's important because you're managing their expectations. People are usually understanding, even if you say this will not be implemented and you give them a reason, and it's important that you mention this as well. People usually understand. The important thing is that you just don't, let these requirements of this request disappear in a void, and then people will never hear whether this is implemented or not, and maybe they are expecting this. So it can do a lot of damage. If you're curious about process mapping, it's a really big task. It's a very complex, well, not complex, again, we're trying to make this simple, but it's a complicated exercise and requires a bit of expertise. If you're curious about this, I have a presentation on my website, so feel free to go and have a look. I'll post the links afterwards on the description of this. Awesome. Stakeholders. This is it's really cool. It's actually one of the things you'll enjoy the most likely in projects like this. It's engaging with people. It's liaising with people. Having an understanding of what everyone wants, how they drive their own ideas and their own needs. Personally, it's one of the things that I like the most. So one of the questions that I get a lot in CRM rollouts is, okay, we identify that marketing and sales are our key stakeholders, but who else should we include in our stakeholders management list? My suggestion when I hear these things, I get shivers down my spine. Usually marketing and sales are not stakeholders. These are your teams, they're your departments. Your stakeholders are people. And I promise you, I mentioned before, there are different people, even in smaller companies within the same team, that may be receiving a CRM very differently. Maybe because it's not the solution that they wanted, maybe because they like the way they're doing work. So, two different salespeople may behave alike, but they have different propensity towards the project. So it's important that you don't cluster them in sales or marketing. So these are not your stakeholders. Stakeholders to me are individuals that will use the system by either producing or consuming information. So I'm either putting data into the system or generating reports or getting data that I need out of it. Are people that are impacted by the system? Think about this. The IT department will never liaise with customers, or very unlikely depending on the organization. but they will definitely have new queries and new requests that are coming from salespeople or marketing people or whoever is using the system that maybe they need to support. So say you forget the login, or where do I add this information, or maybe to a certain extent even some training, who knows. There are also stakeholders that will not be involved directly, for instance HR. Some companies decide to give HR access to the system, some companies they want to involve HR because maybe some job descriptions need to be changed, but these stakeholders are not always involved. And some stakeholders are even sponsored. I mentioned the C-level suite before. It's important that you involve them and you map them as well. How do we map stakeholders? I have a methodology. It's pretty common. Some people call it the power interest methodology. Some people call it the influence propensity. Honestly, there's a name, and or the stakeholder matrix. There's many names for it. But essentially what you want to do is sort of try to group stakeholders, and again, stakeholders being individuals, in a matrix with 4 quadrants, depending on the power that they have. And by power, I mean what influence do they have within the group of people. Say that you have a salesperson that is the most popular salesperson in your organization. This person will most likely influence other colleagues in the way he does work or she does work. So, what power of influence do they have within the project or with other stakeholders? And on the other axis, we usually put the interest. Is this person receiving the CRM well, or is this person against a CRM solution? So you can already see that you would want people that are highly influential, so have high power, having a very high interest. So you want to win those people over because they can definitely make your job a lot easier. So essentially the results of this exercise is actually trying to cluster people into different quadrants of this matrix, because each quadrant you will have to deal with in different ways. Just to be completely clear, you're not going to cut people out. Communication, I mentioned, is one of the most important things. The idea of this exercise is that you will just focus your effort where people need, where you have most likely you will most likely have success. So you want to engage with people that are highly influential and high interest, because then they can be your voice with other groups of stakeholders. So yes. Okay, how do you do this? Essentially, my suggestion is that you sort of assign to each person a number from 1 to 4 for interest and from 1 to 4 for power, and you will sort of cluster them where 1 and 2 are low interest or low power, and 3 and 4 are high interest and high power. So I would start with interest. So get John Doe or Jane Dean and say, okay, how is this person receiving the CRM project? Is their interest high or low? And let's say it's high, so you just give them a 3. And then what is the influence in their group of people or colleagues? Let's say a 3. So that will definitely end up in the manage closely quadrant. Manage closely are people that you want to manage closely, meaning that you want to keep them informed, you want to engage with them a lot, you will most likely discuss with them decisions before you communicate them out, and it's important that they know what's happening. These are essentially what will become your evangelists, if you want to give them a title. The people that are in the keep satisfied quadrants are people that have high influence, high power, but low interest towards the project. It's important that you keep them satisfied because you don't want them to play against you. But they need to be informed. They need to be happy with. You have to compromise with some of the requests that they have. So make sure you involve them and you keep them satisfied. Like it said, if a person has not much influential power, but is of interest, this is still very important, because of course these people they're still making rumors, they're still preaching your project. So keep them informed, make sure that they're preaching the right things, don't have them spreading wrong gossip about the project. Make sure that they know, and so you have to keep them well informed. If people have low interest and raw power, you have to monitor them. It doesn't mean that you just don't consider them. It's important that you don't forget them, but of course the effort that you put would be minimum compared to the other 3 quadrants, and they most likely be the receivers of, say, newsletters or like group mass communication, like newsletters or notice board kind of updates. Once you're done with this person, then proceed to the next person and the next group, and then in the end you will have a map of stakeholders. I suggest you do this maybe in an Excel file or just a piece of paper. Do not expose this document. It's important that this remains with you. It's something that it's confidential, I would say, and make sure that you go and readjust as you discuss with people, because you realize that maybe some people have more influence, or they have different interests towards the project as you talk with them. So make sure you keep this updated and you behave accordingly to what you discover. Workshops are actually an important part of rollouts. You would need a workshop because sometimes you have you collected all the requirements, you understand the as-is process, the to-be process, but you still need a final aligned decision on certain topics, and you want to bring people together to discuss this and make sure that the agreement is done. I think you're talking about leads. With marketing, they say this is how we generate leads and this is how we're going to put them in the system. On the other end, the sales will consume the information that marketing will put in the system, and this is they expect certain things. So you will discuss with these two group of people, but workshops are where you essentially bring them together and agree on how the handover of this information is done. On top of this, there may be areas or decisions where you seem to be an impasse, and sometimes you have even like very stubborn stakeholders. Maybe there are two seniors that are disagreeing on certain points. Bringing them in workshops where they're discussing and they're involved with their own teams usually can solve this kind of issues. It's a good opportunity for them to discuss and revise their idea. Even if they're really stubborn, this would work. And obviously, if you have functionalities that you're still refining the requirements, or if you want to get some priorities to understand and agree with the greater team, then this is also a good opportunity. Workshops in general are good forums for broad communication. People that are in there, they feel empowered. They feel like they're making decisions, they're contributing to the project. They know the information before everybody else in the company. So workshops are really powerful, positive events and catalysts for projects like this. And they provide alignment all in all. So there's a lot of reasons why you would want a workshop. My suggestion is, of course, in the workshop, don't involve everybody at the same time. Make sure the workshop, it's in smaller groups, and hold more than one if needed. Prioritize stakeholders that have high power, high interest, as well as high power and high interest together. And maybe all the things that you're doing in the workshop, just follow whichever workshop best practices are there, meaning plan ahead, include topics that are relevant to all. You don't want people to sort of drift off and start working on their laptops while doing this. In fact, if you can, just pack away the laptops and phones and everything. Yes, put controversial topics. So you don't have to necessarily drag people in a separate room to discuss this. I mentioned, if you have people that are disagreeing on certain topics, this is a good forum to do this. If you have stakeholders that are, that are key for you, maybe high power, high interest, or maybe people that have high influence, but they're against the project, or they're still not sure, make sure you notify them in advance, because it's not a surprise to them. There's this discussion coming, they can prepare. One powerful thing during workshop is working in groups. If you break people into smaller groups and let them work in their own group on different topics, mix the groups. They don't necessarily, in fact, it's advisable not to have people from the same team, but make them work on the same topic, on the same process, even for just a few minutes at a time, and then make them present what the solution is. This usually provides alignment and a much stronger bonding and closeness to the project as well. The important thing is keep them dynamic. Important thing, make sure people are engaged, and have a strong moderator. If you have someone that is above the parties, not by rank but by interest, say if you have marketing and sales disagreeing on leads handover, take someone from finance or from logistics or from IT. These people most likely won't have a say in this, because they probably couldn't care less on how leads are handed over, but they can provide alignment, especially if they're strong communicators. Again, use a workshop to communicate. It's a good way to broadcast information. This is how things will be done. Bring clarity, bring alignment, discuss points of disagreements. It's important that people have a chance to discuss these things, and most importantly, take decisions. My suggestion is take meaningful decisions, but even small ones are fine. They drive alignment. If you have to decide on the launch date, and maybe there's a difference between 1 week and the other. Or if you want to decide which kind of information and with which granularity you're gonna log this kind of information, then do that. Training. There are a lot of topics that you can discuss and take decisions on. And always remember, you will hold a workshop most likely once you're done with the requirements. So you already know what you will be doing. For most of the big lines are clear, let's put it like this. So the workshop is just a tool to sort of engage with your stakeholders more, because you will then most likely have enough material to take decisions already. So it's more of a tool for your stakeholders, and you'll obviously take away a lot of things, but it's mostly to engage with them. And one thing that you have to remember is that not one of the people in the workshop will have the same idea in mind or the complete picture about what's going to happen. I keep banging on this example of leads from marketing and sales. You will probably most likely you have mapped the process with marketing, how they generate leads. You map the process with sales on how they generate leads, but sales doesn't know what you discuss with marketing, and marketing doesn't know what you discuss with sales. So they will come with their own understanding, their own biases, and they will not see the complete picture. So take time, allocate time to discuss these points and explain the other side of the discussions. It's very, very important. Good. Communication. This is a big chunk of the project. I mentioned that you will spend a lot of time doing communication, but for a good reason. So one of the questions that I have is, how do I communicate? What's the most effective way to communicate? Everyone has different ideas. The important thing is there is not one single way. There's a lot of work that you need to put into this. The good news is that there are many forms of communication that you can use. Some of them are broadcasting sort of forms, so you're just reaching a wider audience, maybe with more generic information. Some other ways are more personal, like one-on-one emails or meetings or phone calls. So just think about that you have a lot of means of communication, and there's a lot of means that are not direct. Say the word of mouth. If you communicate to one of the stakeholders that are highly influential and that have a positive propensity towards the project, then you can account on the word of mouth as well. This is extremely powerful because usually word of mouth is actually what is more convincing, even more than a newsletter or say an intranet announcement, so to say. So the approach is, I mentioned, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, so it's better that you just tailor the approach. My idea is that you go back to your stakeholders map and look at the different quadrants. If you have stakeholders that are highly influential and highly interested, make sure you allocate a great deal of time to talk to them and talk to them in ways that they're receiving well. If you have stakeholders that say salespeople, sales reps, they're on the road, don't create long presentations. Give them a call if they're in their car, or send them an email to explain what the thing is, and they will most likely read while waiting at the clients. So reach them in a way that you feel, or maybe they'll tell you, this is how I prefer, so go and talk to them. If you have people in the manage closely quadrant, that's someone that you want to go the extra step, and if you have news that maybe will affect them negatively. So look, this requirement that you asked for is not coming, or maybe it's coming in a later release. Take the time to go and deliver this news in advance before everybody else, so they have time to prepare. They know this, and I'm sure they will appreciate the fact that you took the time and notified them personally. If you have big clusters of stakeholders, everybody else, so to say, create newsletters. Newsletters are a great tool for every stakeholders in every quadrant. It's something that will make the company feel like things are moving. It's something that will inform everybody about the progress, what has been done in the past, quarter, or the past months, or the past fortnights, depending on how the project is moving. So, make sure you include different types of communication, don't just focus on one. I mentioned before, create evangelists. Make sure that these people are informed well about what's happening. You don't want them to go and spread the wrong word around. It's important that they're always updated. Feel free to share some of the documents if you can or if you wish. The important thing is that they are the ones that not only will spread the right word, but they will also stop gossip as they hear it, because maybe they are in the ranks, or maybe they are they are very good communicators, they are friends with people, and if they hear and want gossip, this is important that it's stopped immediately, and these evangelists can be a good help for this. Talking of rumors and gossip, I mentioned this needs to be stopped as it arises because, if you spread wrong information, this will affect the expectations of everyone. And wrong information doesn't necessarily have to be something like, oh, I heard that, the CRM is delayed, but it can also be something positive. If I go back to the example of the app that I mentioned before, people can start saying, oh, the app is coming the day that it's been launched. If this is not true, it needs to be corrected, and people need to know that this is unfortunately not the case. One important form of communication that people usually leave aside, but that I found extremely useful, is tangible forms of communication. So think of a leaflet. I remember printing a small A5 carton that then was folded, and there was information on it around if I need this help, who do I go to? If I get locked out, how do I recover my account? If I need to, log this particular information, how do I go about it? Maybe there were critical parts of the business. And people usually keep this leaflet on the desks. I went early to the office and then dropped a leaflet on everyone's desk. And people found it, they found it, entertaining. They keep it on the desk. They're on the phone. They're playing with it. They're always referring to this. Maybe there's just a URL to log into your CRM. It's an interesting thing, and maybe there are important dates. Oh, today is the date of the training, or the rollout and the launch date will be on date XYZ. So put the information that it's meaningful for them, and most likely you'll keep this. You see people keeping this on their desk for like months, it's really good. Good. Now for communication covered, let's look at training and rollout. Training is another important event, just like the workshop in rollout, and it's important that you get it right, because training is, first you have to have people in the mood to do training, because they have to learn how to use the system. So make it interactive, make it friendly. There are a few things that you need to take care of. The important thing is keep it meaningful. Make sure, not everyone needs to know everything, and especially different clusters or different teams may most likely need different things. I hardly doubt that people in supply chain will need to know how to generate leads for as an example, right? So keep it meaningful, make it interactive. So have a system where people can create customers, can create opportunities or deals, can talk to each other, and maybe they create something for somebody else. You can do role playing. I am the person on the road. I create a quote. I would like my colleague internally to follow up with the customer. So do role playing, make them interactive. Make sure people are talking through the systems. Today, many systems have chat functionalities or social functionalities like walls and stuff. Have people talk to each other. Maybe creating a report for each other is actually something good they can learn if report is part of your training. The important thing is that you use real system configuration. Some companies decide to pair their CRM systems with other company systems. This could be like acquisition systems. They could be emailing systems if it's marketing. They can be, on the other end, maybe ERP systems. There's different systems that company use, and it's important that what you're playing with today is as close as possible to a real life scenario. The reason for this is obviously you want people to sort of experience what working in a real life scenario is, and today during the training is their opportunity to do so. To make sure that this is effective, consider making smaller groups of people, not more than 5 or 10 participants. And the reason for this, you want to be able to go and help people. I promise you, even the most tech-savvy people will get locked out on the day of training. They will not know where to go. They will get lost. They will do something wrong. And this is why we're doing training. So you want to be able to go and help them side by side, looking at the same screen, if possible, given the times. But, you have to have time to support them. So smaller sessions is as important. In terms of support, one suggestion that I have, you can have maybe a person within the organization that can be trained in advance, or can be trained more thoroughly to sort of help and support people and your stakeholders in the process, that they can support you not only during training, but even afterwards. Usually training, the train-the-trainer concept, so training a person to do this is actually a good idea, especially in medium to big organizations. This person can obviously grow the skill set and expertise. It's a good motivation for them to do this. On the other end, you will have a resource internally that can help you and support even after the training is done, and that will save you probably a lot of time even down the track. So the important thing is that you realize that training doesn't stop in the class. So you hold your training session, but it doesn't stop there. It's something that people will forget the moment they get out of the class, and so you need to give them the chance to keep practicing. Usually, some CRM systems as what it's called a test system or a staging or sandbox. Different systems call it, or the queue system, in different ways. But from experience, people don't usually go back and play with the CRM just because it's fun. So make sure that you start rolling out your system immediately after the training, not more than a few days later, because people will forget. You can also follow up with a questionnaire to make sure that people understood, or if there's still some questions or clarification that they need, then you know how to develop your next session of training, and make yourself available at all times. It's important, especially in the first month after the rollout as well, because they still see you as the point of contact, as the trainer, and you want people to make sure that are actually doing the right thing from the get-go. I mentioned create customized material, leave people something tangible, or even just PDFs and some pages in your intranet that people can refer to. So curate this material and publish it so people can go and refer back. This is really critical, because especially if you pick one of the big solutions, people will start Googling things, and what they find on Google is most likely generic information or something that another company published. And most likely the process will be similar, but not quite the same. So having your own documents with maybe your own branding and maybe with your own flowcharts material that are saved on your intranet or on a shared drive, or however you publish your material, can be a lifesaver in these circumstances. Rollout, good. You have your own people trained, you mapped your processes, you agreed on everything, you communicate plenty. Now it's time to roll out. How do you go about this? Given the current times, can we do this over video conference? Or maybe we're a big organization, can we do like a big group meeting? Look, my suggestion is, of course, this could work, but if you can and if it's safe to do so, it's usually better that you do this in person. I know this is not possible in many circumstances today, but if you are rolling out a system and if you can be present physically next to the people that are actually using it, is usually very, very powerful. It's quite obvious people during video calls, they sort of drift off and start working on something else or get distracted, and they're not most likely in an office environment. Maybe they're working from home, so they're naturally distracted. You can't blame them. So it's usually better if you can do this in person and maybe work side by side on these things. What activities do you need to take care of on the rollout day? First thing, of course, you have to issue logins. Make sure you have a single point of contact that does that, because if some people need to ask for help or need to ask questions, or where do I log in, what is the URL, then they know exactly who to reach to. And then answer every question quickly. So people will have a lot of questions, they will forget how to do this. And especially for critical processes, if people don't receive an answer, they'll go on and do what they were doing before. And if this works, and usually still works, if you have a good consultancy firm, they will ensure that most of the critical things will still work, because you don't want to block work in case something goes wrong. People will just realize that this is working, and they will just going back doing the whole thing because they won't see the value in actually going through the CRM. So make sure that you're available and you are answering quickly. I suggested before, if you have people that can help you with this, sort of the trainer or evangelists, consider having this to shadow some of the users. They can support you in these activities. You can shadow some critical users yourself, and then ask for help from other people. So it's a good chance to do some good teamwork there. Good. And here we are on the last session, measurement. It's very important as well, maybe not as important as communication, but it definitely doesn't have to be an afterthought. It's one of the things that needs to be done or must be done on the side. There are two metrics or two clusters of metrics that I would suggest for this kind of projects. One obviously is strictly linked to the project, so the implementation metrics, saying, you want to measure whether your project was successful, if the change has been received by people, and if the work that you put or the consultancy firm puts into this project actually paid off. So this implementation matrix, refers to the implementation of the project. You can also hold your consultancy firm, accountable to these metrics. You want to make sure that they're working properly and they're ensuring that people are, the adoption is going well and people are supported. The process is working as it should. Of course, on the other end, you sort of put out a CRM, or you engage in a CRM project because you want to achieve some business improvement, and this is probably revenue or process improvements. So of course you will have business metrics, and this could be, measuring the ROI of the project, or how good was the improvement in sales or in opportunities. I took the opportunity of putting down some very generic examples. Obviously these need to be adapted from organization to organization, but some implementation metrics could be around adoption rate, how many people are actually using the system properly, how many records have mistakes, some records that are broken from one system to the other. So you have an ERP and a CRM talking together. These things are not necessarily showing you that people are not using the system or that the system wasn't implemented correctly, but they can point out where there are areas where you can improve, or areas where maybe there are processes that are slightly misaligned, or systems that are not as efficient as they should. And not every stakeholder will be vocal about things. Some people will just sort of keep going, grind their teeth and say, okay, fine, this is the new system, I will do it. But it doesn't have to be like that. So look closely at your metrics and look if these point out things that you have the chance to correct. And if you have questions about your matrix, don't just read too much into the data. It's important that you go and talk to your stakeholders and ask them, how did you perceive this? Do you think this is working? These kind of questions. Still engage with your stakeholders even after the project. Business metrics, I mentioned, increasing sales and opportunity values, a number of visits, calls, interactions in general, but also they can be for things like quality of the sales forecast. Maybe before you used to do this in Excel, there's nothing wrong in Excel, but it's just a very static way of doing things. Maybe now you have a CRM, everyone has data updated, so you can even just download and do this in Excel if you wish, but many solutions already have a sales forecast built in, so you can measure the quality of this forecast. Maybe the speed of the decision making has increased. There's a lot of business metrics that can be impacted by this. If you have especially a current CRM implementation, you can compare this. So make sure you get a benchmark before you engage in changing the system. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. You can still take a snapshot of your current business and try to guess what is the metric today, and still see if the CRM system has improved this. Most likely, if you implemented everything correctly and your stakeholders are using the system and everyone is happy, is a bit of a bold statement, but if things have been done correctly, most likely this will be the case. So yes, consider all the metrics that you can and adapt them to your business. Cool. So this was my take. Obviously, these CRM rollouts are projects that require a lot of effort. There's a lot of expertise that goes into these things, a lot of people that need to work together, and don't do this alone. It's important that if you get stuck at any point, please reach out for help. I want to stress that what I covered today is just a very, very broad, basic and generalized way of doing things. But obviously there's a lot of suggestions that I hope will be applicable to you, and I hope clarified a bit on what goes into these projects. I am for once very happy to receive any feedback and have any suggestion. Maybe you have a different take on some of these topics, or maybe you disagree with some of these. Maybe you're just happy of what you heard and you're curious about hearing more. I would love to hear your feedback, whatever that is. So please do reach out. I'm more than happy to even just have a chat with you. I have my email and my website and my LinkedIn. All these links I will just publish in the presentation. Meanwhile, if you're just curious, just check out some of the other presentation. Obviously, all this content that I created is not just my work. I obviously engage with other professionals. I mentioned that one of the things that I like the most is engaging with people. So I had people helping me out with designs, with photos, with presentations, and even content. So make sure you check them out as well. They deserve the recognition as well. Having said that, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for listening in. Cheers.